Some days the federal courts can be a little sleepy. This was not one of those days, but that's why I'm here. Happy Wednesday, Eeyore! I'm Brian, and this is the morning report for the federal courts for September 3rd, 2025. Double tap your screen, leave me a comment on your favorite Winnie the Pooh character, try to watch a little even if you're coming back later, and check out the link in my bio to help me keep going. Okay, we have got a lot to get to, so let's get going. We are going to start out with some huge news from the Fifth Circuit, which essentially just overturned the Trump administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act of 1789. I'm going to try to hit some high points for you real quick, but it is killing me because this is one of my favorite subjects. All right, we're going to start with just a little bit of history. So in 1789, the Federalists and Jeffersonian Republicans were squaring off for one of the worst political fights in American history, the election of 1800. Total mess, John Adams v. Thomas Jefferson, and one of the biggest arguments was over the French. Because right after we finished our revolution, the French started theirs. And even though the French had totally bailed us out in our revolution, Americans were kind of split on whether it was the French monarchy that had helped us out or the French people. So whose side do we take? Well, the Federalists, who controlled basically the whole American government at this point, were on the side of the French monarchy and decided the French revolutionaries were bad people. But there were a lot of French people in America, and the Federalists wanted them out. So they passed 4 laws. Known collectively as the Alien and Sedition Acts, designed to get rid of French revolutionaries living in the States and prevent any dangerous talk from affecting Americans. These laws made it a crime to publish anything bad about the government, allowed the president to expel people he didn't like, lots of powers. The 2 most important for our discussion are the Alien Friends Act and the Alien Enemies Act. Both allowed the president to kick non-citizens out of the country. Alien Friends allowed him to kick out anyone he wanted. Alien Enemies allowed him to kick out anyone who we were officially at war with. So, Alien Friends, Alien Enemies. And the Jeffersonians were very much against both of these, but fortunately, so were most Americans. All 4 of the Alien and Sedition Acts were incredibly unpopular, overwhelmingly, and they all expired after 2 years and kind of took the Federalists with them. That's part of why Jefferson won. But one law stayed on the books, and that's the Alien Enemies Act. So as long as we were at war with a country, the president could detain or expel anyone from that country. That's how we ended up with the Japanese internment camps in World War II, restrictions on Germans during World War I. That was all the Alien Enemies Act. But there needed to be a declaration of war for this to be used. Until 2025, when President Trump declared that the government of Venezuela, through the actions of a Venezuelan gang, Tren de Aragua, had in fact formally invaded the United States, and we were essentially at war with that gang and Venezuela. That meant that he could invoke the Alien Enemies Act against any Venezuelan, or at least anyone the president said was a member of Tren de Aragua, which he proceeded to do. And he claimed that the Alien Enemies Act was written in such a way that it was totally up to his discretion as president, and his decisions on the act could not be reviewed by the court. Now, this case has already been before the Supreme Court, possibly twice. I've kind of lost count. They said that it can be reviewed by the court, and then it was returned to the Fifth Circuit to resolve a few issues, including whether or not the notice requirements provided by the government were sufficient. So they've now increased the notice to 7 days, I think. If I understood correctly, one judge didn't like the notice requirement, but the other 2 did, and one judge didn't like the main opinion, but the other 2 did. So both get 2 out of 3. We have an opinion. So final opinion on this case is that we are not at war with Tren de Aragua or Venezuela, and the president is not allowed to invoke the Alien Enemies Act to deport Venezuelans without a formal declaration from Congress. So, at least for the moment, the Alien Enemies Act is off the table, but I'm certain this will end up back in the Supreme Court, so we'll hear about this again soon enough. Okay, next. We also got a huge answer in Newsom v. Trump. And I did a very deep dive on this yesterday. You can find it on TikTok or on my YouTube, but I'll give you the short version. Earlier this year, the president declared a series of emergencies in California that he said needed to be solved by sending in the National Guard. And he did this by issuing a series of memoranda and executive orders and other documents. But before they were sent in, the members of the military were trained to follow a law called Posse Comitatus, which says that the military isn't allowed to enforce civilian laws by, for example, searching suspects. unless there is an explicit constitutional or congressional exemption. But they were also told during their training that some of the things they would normally not allowed to do under Posse Comitatus, like crowd control or traffic control, were totally fine for them to do now because they helped solve the emergencies that the president had declared. And the president said he had this express power under the Constitution in Article 2, Section 3, called the Take Care Clause, to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, which implied that he could send the military to solve these problems, these emergencies. But yesterday, the court rejected that argument, based heavily on a very famous case called Youngstown Sheet and Tube, which is in my shared documents in the subject matter library under foundational cases. If you want to read it, it's one of those ones, if you're interested in this, you should probably know. The Take Care Clause gives the president power to execute the laws written by lawmakers, aka Congress. He is the executive. He executes, but he does not write law. So he can't claim a power derived from his own directive, from his own executive order. The other issue, according to the court, is that the exception in Posse Comitatus only applies to express powers in the Constitution. Even if the power did apply, he's implying something extra from that power, and implied powers are not an exception to Posse Comitatus. Finally, the court found that the government did all of this intentionally or willfully, changing the training process, intentionally doctoring requests so that they would be within the language of the law, a variety of other things, because they knew that this was a violation of Posse Comitatus, and they did it anyway. So the court gave sort of a vague directive on how we have to move forward. It said that its ruling applies only to California, that the government doesn't have to withdraw the troops, though it does note that they will probably require retraining, and it sort of tells them they don't have to stop doing anything, but I think they're not allowed to send more troops. It's a little vague. But it definitely says that the things they've done in the past were violations, things that qualified as enforcing local laws, and they cannot do those again in the future. They can continue to guard federal buildings, but no more directing traffic or going on narcotic raids. So, does this apply to Chicago, D.C.? Not exactly. But if this case survives appeal, and I think it was written this narrowly so that it would survive appeal, it'll probably be used by future courts to direct federal behavior in the next case, which is probably going to happen pretty soon. Okay, Cook v. Trump. Cook v. Trump is a new case that was filed at the end of last week. President Trump removed, or tried to remove, Lisa Cook from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. The president has been trying to get someone friendlier to his agenda on the FRB for some time. He's been unsuccessful so far. The FRB dictates monetary policy and interest rates, and keeping it insulated from political whims is incredibly important because its decisions are almost always unpopular, but incredibly necessary to keep the economy stable. So members of the Federal Reserve Board are appointed to 14-year terms and can only be removed for cause. But what the heck does that mean? Well, Lisa Cook is a decorated economist with a pedigree from Spelman, Oxford, Berkeley, the Treasury Department, Council of Economic Advisors. But when President Trump failed to get Chairman Powell to resign, he decided to go after Dr. Cook. The allegations here come from Bill Pulte, who's the director of Federal Housing Finance Agency. He has accused Dr. Cook of mortgage fraud, allegations that she denies, but which President Trump claims give him the right to remove her from the board. It should be noted that Mr. Pulte has also alleged mortgage fraud against Adam Schiff, so this might just be his MO. I don't know. Now, the judge in this case noted the uniqueness of this situation. No president has ever tried to fire a Federal Reserve governor. She set an expedited schedule to decide whether Dr. Cook gets a temporary restraining order, an injunction, or a summary judgment. But for now, Dr. Cook will remain in her position until briefing is complete. All right, that is your morning report for the past day in the federal courts. Consider supporting me if you're enjoying this. Check out the link in my bio. Otherwise, just keep watching. Thanks a lot, everybody, and have a fantastic Wednesday.